I'm Tom Glass. I'm from Houston, Texas. I am a retired guy from ExxonMobil, and I was fortunate enough to have them pay for me to go to law school and get a law license while I was working for them. So I have business and legal
That's what
expertise.
I needed, was somebody to pay for my law degree.
I think the root cause of most of our national problems is that the federal government is going way beyond the bounds of the Constitution in almost every area of our life, whether it's our power generation or just the general liberties. They're groping us at the airports. They're spying on us without warrant. They are saying that if the president declares us a terrorist, they can make us disappear without a trial. They're trying to take our guns, et cetera, et cetera. And I think our liberty, state, and country are dying because no one is enforcing the Constitution and stopping the feds when they engage in those tyrannical acts. I think to enforce the Constitution, it's pretty much as simple as honoring our oaths to the Constitution. Every one of us who's taken the office, who's become an attorney, who's in the military, law enforcement, and all branches of the government at all levels, have sworn, the way we do it in Texas is sworn to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And where I'm come from, if you've sworn to support something and you see it being violated and it's within the scope of your powers of the office you hold, you're obligated by that oath to do something about it. And that's what I think this whole process is about. It's time for us to do something about that. We've been historically, one of the things I learned in law school is essentially the legal community started a long time ago relying completely on the Supreme Court to determine what the Constitution means. But I've actually read the Constitution, and I know that nowhere in the Constitution does it say they're the final arbiter. My progressive law professors taught us that Marbury versus Madison, that John Marshall said that he was the guy that was going to say what was going on about constitutional meaning, but that's not the way I read it. And even if that's what he meant, I read that it was his duty under his oath to interpret the Constitution. But it's our duty, if we've taken the oath, to do it. We expect our military guys not to follow unlawful orders. Well, we in the legislature, or you guys in the legislature, we in the bar, and anybody who's taken an oath to the office has that same responsibility, not to follow unlawful orders. And I see the process of what we're doing here is encouraging the entire state of Texas to work together to start honoring our oath and supporting it. And by the way, I'm not going to comment on the other bills that are coming here. I just see this bill, but I will say is this. Enforcing the Constitution is the prerequisite to getting anything done in protecting our liberty. Even when we pass future amendments to the Constitution, putting more limits on there, if they're not following the Constitution we've got today, so why do we expect them to not try to start chipping away at whatever bounds we put on them in the future? Whatever we do, we've got to have an enforcement mechanism, and that's what I see this bill here doing. So I see it as complementary to the approach that some of the approaches that are here to follow. I would say one other thing. If you think about deferring to the Supreme Court to do the final arbiter of constitutional meaning, or just to determine what's constitutional and what's not, I would say that I call that the Goliath approach to fighting for liberty. What you do is you're surrendering the decision about your fate to the very tyrant you're fighting, and then you get massacred. How's it been working for us to defer to the Supreme Court? How did it work on Obamacare? What is our previous Attorney General's win-loss record? It might be good for baseball, but it's not good enough for protecting my liberty. That's why I think this approach is necessary. And what this approach does is it requires us to exercise independent judgment. We know that if, we're one Supreme Court justice away from declaring that the Second Amendment doesn't mean what it says, that we don't have a natural right to keep and bear arms, and the only guys who get to keep arms are the National Guard and the military. If the Supreme Court, we come to that day, and the Supreme Court says that we don't have the right to keep and bear arms, are we going to say the Supreme Court said it, that I believe it, that settles it? I submit to you that the Supreme Court is not the Pope, and they're not divinely inspired. And we have as good a minds here in Texas as to understand what the founders wrote and what they meant as the Supreme Court does. And probably we're going to get it better than them, certainly given the history that we've got in the last century. Let me talk briefly about the benefits of this particular act. One of the cool things about this approach is I don't ever want to have to rely on a Rhode Island, New York, or California voter to protect my liberty ever again. And the cool thing about this is if the people of Texas, through their elected representatives, declare something to be unconstitutional and as the sovereign states that we are, say that we're not going to allow the Constitution to be violated in here, we win. And I think that the people of Texas and the legislature of Texas is better suited to protect my liberty than the Supreme Court or the federal government, just clearly by the history that we've got. The nice thing about this bill is that it streamlines the process by which the legislature can make that declaration. You know, you guys are kind of busy, I've noticed, as I've wandered around the halls during this very intense session. And we need time whereby parts of the legislature can consider these weighty issues of how our liberties are being violated when we're not under crunch time. And what I really like about Representative Flynn's bill here is that it sets up that mechanism by which when the session's not going on, we can study this, come to conclusions, and refer it to the entire legislature for later consideration. The other thing that I like about this, I talked about going to the Supreme Court as the Goliad approach. I consider this to be the San Jacinto approach for fighting for liberty, where we've actually won it, right? Why did we win at San Jacinto?
That you said so.
Yes.
If the legislature was to consider an act and declare it a violation of the 10th Amendment,
yes, sir.
What would happen then?
Okay. Today, somebody earlier talked about Sheriff Mack and the Constitutional Sheriff's movement. Today, any law enforcement officer or any district attorney that understands the oath, the Constitution, and takes their oath seriously can arrest a federal agent who's violating the Constitution under the color of an unconstitutional federal statute without you guys taking a single step. For instance, NDAA, indefinite detentions provision, okay, where they come in and declare a Texan to be a terrorist and make them disappear without a trial, never getting to the Supreme Court, okay? That's kidnapping under Texas law. It's a criminal act. And so the sheriffs, any Texas Ranger, any law enforcement officer can go arrest that person and try them in Texas court with Texas due process under Texas Constitution and start winning our freedom back. The thing that this does is it gives aid and comfort to our law enforcement apparatus when they go and want to take on their oath. Instead of just messing with one Texan or one Texas sheriff, what this legislative process allows us to do is to say, if you mess with one Texan, you're messing with all of Texas. And didn't your mama tell you not to do that? So this is a way of getting us unified, all on one page, and it does it in a bipartisan way. One of the things about San Jacinto is that we picked our battle there. We waited for the right terrain, the right time, the right issue, the right thing. That's what this allows us, through our representatives, in a bipartisan way, picking the issue that Texans are the most unified on, to tell the federal government to back down. When you stand up to a bully, what happens next is primarily up to the bully, right? They can either back down or they can double down. And if we do this through the legislative process the way we're talking about, in a bipartisan way on the issue that Texans care about the most, it's much more likely that the bully will back down, as they have done in a number of other states when we did it. All right. So that's By the one other final benefit, this bill increases the power and responsibility of you guys. The representatives in D.C. have taken away too much of the power that the founders intended each one of you to have. It makes your job much more important, and I like it that way because I can talk to you guys by getting in my car. I can't do it with D.C. Thank you. I'll be happy to take questions if anybody has any.
Mr. Flynn, if you'd like to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity to present the bill, but I also remind that legislative victories are won an inch at a time. We often take our losses in miles if we're not careful, and this is just a beginning. But I appreciate all the people that did come up here and testify for this bill. I believe it's an important bill. I tell my friends at the National Conference of State Legislature, if we're not careful and we don't protect our rights, we would be putting ourselves out of a job. If you relent everything to the federal government, and also they don't really do the same job that we do. And as it's been said, few of us ever get a chance to really talk to the president. We all get to talk to our mayors, and those are the people that make things on a local basis. Here again, we all believe in a citizen legislature. That's why we serve, and it gives us an opportunity to be close to the people. And I think that the big deal is that this legislation seeks to ensure that the federal government understands that the states created the federal government, not the other way around. If we continue to allow the United States government to create through debt, unfunded mandates, unconstitutional laws, and massive overreach control of our states, then we might just as well surrender the building to them. And because the laws we make for the betterment of all Texans won't mean a thing. And we see that on a regular basis.
Chairman Flynn, just to make sure I understand how it would work functionally, so we would have the bill would create a standing committee, joint committee.
Yes, sir.
Of the House and Senate, and I guess the membership would be appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House.
Yes, sir, and it would be a bipartisan manner.
Okay, and so it'd be a bipartisan joint committee, standing committee of the House and the Senate, and it would, or joint committee of the two.
Yes, sir.
And they would, their charge would be to consider bills. So I guess if a member of the House thought that a particular act of Congress was in violation of the Constitution, then they would file a bill requesting the committee to review that, or file a resolution or something of that nature. But anyway, the committee would take it up, or the committee could take it up on their own sua sponte, I guess. And then if the joint committee decides that yes, this particular bill that causes us to do whatever, or this particular act does violate, or rule does violate the U.S. Constitution, then you would make a recommendation to the full House and Senate of what?
Of the findings of that
be
committee.
A declaration.
Yes, sir. Yes,
and
sir.
A finding affirmative to that effect.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then I suppose those would then
that would empower our Attorney General. It would empower our state to be able to notify the federal government that we are not recognizing that unlawful law.
Or I guess it could also be used to encourage or compel the Attorney General to file suit.
Yes, sir.
Or it could be something in the form of a resolution going to congressional members, encouraging them to withdraw that act. Or, as Mr. Glass suggested, it could be something that empowers our state officials or public officials within the state to act or not act within a particular manner.
Very well said, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Just want to make sure I got it.
Yes, sir.
Members, any other questions? All right. With that, the chair, if there's no objection, the chair withdraws the committee substitute to HB 98, and the chair leaves HB 98 pending at this time. you.